to the Public Works Gain Reduction Committee. Today's Monday, May 22nd. I'm Chairman, Councilmember Joe Buscaino. I'm joined by Mr. O'Farrell, Mr. Rue. Thank you for joining us. Before I begin, I do want to recognize my legislative deputy, Laura Hill, celebrating her birthday today. Laura, happy birthday. Now that I embarrassed her, hopefully she still sticks to our office and works for me still. But happy birthday, Laura. Thanks for all that you do for us. Okay, colleagues, so I can direct your attention to the agenda. Thank you all for joining us here today. In looking at the agenda, if we can take on consent, actually, let's do this. We have two continuance items. Items 5 and 6, we will continue those two items. 5 and 8, rather, sorry. Colleagues are okay with that? There's still some loose ends we have to tie on those two items. So without objection, we'll continue item 5 and 8. And then on consent, let's take, unless you want to hold on these items, 6 and 7. We good with that? Okay, without objection. And item 4 we'll take on consent. However, we do have a technical correction. If I can ask the CAO to read the technical amendment into the record for item 4. You want to change order? Please come forward, identify yourself. Thank you for joining us.
Sure. Roy Cervantes with the Office of the CAO. Our office is recommending the correction to replace recommendations 4, 5, 6, and 7 as currently stated in the board report. Our office has identified additional funding or replacement funding for that Green Street project to negate the need for the loan itself. So the replacement recommendation number 4 is to transfer $47,427 from Fund 100, Department 82, Salaries General Account from the Stormwater Pollution Abatement Fund to the Stormwater Pollution Abatement Fund number 511, Department 50, Appropriation Unit number 50 NS61, as stated in the handout.
Thank you. So without objection, we'll approve item 4 on consent with that as amended. Okay, moving forward on today's agenda, we can now take item number 1. If you can read that into the record, Mr. Clerk.
Good afternoon, John White, City Clerk. Item 1, LADOT and City Engineer Joint Report relative to the construction of the North Outwater Multimodal Los Angeles River Bridge and related actions.
Very good. We have a number of speaker cards here before us. I can, when I call your name, please come to the podium. A number of speakers here. Jennifer Sampson, please come forward. Good afternoon. Followed by John Switowski. And if John come forward, and then is it Omar Brownson? Please come forward. You'll be the third speaker.
Good afternoon, Councilman. May I submit this to you for your review?
Please do.
So Jennifer Sampson with River LA. I've been working on this bridge for nearly 5 years on behalf of River LA and in partnership with the City of Los Angeles. That in and of itself, all the blood, sweat, and tears might not be enough reason to move this project forward, but I think there are some compelling financial reasons to move this project forward. What you'll be looking at is from the Bureau of Engineering's staff report that was submitted on April 25th. And basically what it lays out is that over 5 years, River LA has donated its time to move this project forward. And we're the closest we've ever been to being able to move one of these master plan, River Revitalization Master Plan bridges forward. There are over 10 bridges listed in the LA River Revitalization Master Plan for pedestrian bridges, and this would be the first one to make it into construction.
Thank you, Ms. Hampson. Now, John Switowski.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. It's a pleasure to be here as part of the River LA team working on this. We've generated a lot of community support for this bridge. This has gone through an exhaustive, lengthy process of taking input from the community and frankly changing the landing of the bridge and changing the outcome of this bridge in response to that community. It's gone through a process. And in a project such as this, the community is not going to be 100% on board, of course. But I want to talk to you about something that I think has really chilling effects when it comes to the river, which has gained a lot of momentum in recent months and years. This is a unique public-private partnership that brought $5 million to the table. And if this project is not approved, we're afraid this really has ramifications throughout the philanthropic community, and saying the city of LA can't be a partner with the private community in actually building projects up and down the river, and we think that would be a shame. So we urge support for this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Omar Brownson. And Omar will be followed, please come up, by Dario Machado, Mia Leher, and Stephen Mejia. Please come forward. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Omar Brownson. I'm the Executive Director of River LA. I've been working on this project since I became the first Executive Director of River LA 6.5 years ago. I'm here today to submit over 100 letters of support. These are in both Council District Ruse and Councilman O'Farrell's districts. This project has received its environmental approvals back in 2013. Bids are in hand and have only been able to be extended to recently. We've raised over $5 million in private philanthropy. We've raised over $4 million in public funds from the county, from the state, to bring this project forward. So it is 100% approved from all its permits at the local, state, and federal levels. The bids are in hand, the permits are approved, and the funds are ready to move forward. This has been a unique partnership with the City of Los Angeles. There is not going to be a better time to move a project forward than today.
Thank you. Dario? Dario Machado, is it?
Yes, sir. Good afternoon.
Yes, I do. Thank you. Yes, we do. Thank you.
My name is Officer Machado. I'm here with the LAPD Mounted Unit. Being one of the trainers there, I'm here representing the Mounted Unit in supporting the bridge. The reason for that is the benefits, working so closely with the community in our area and being part of that community. To be able, especially with the equine community in that area, to be able to get people across the river safely. Instead of having to go across the water, especially when the water's high, or across main streets. Also, being one of the first responders nearest to Griffith Park, it would greatly benefit our response time into Griffith Park on horseback. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your service to our city. Be safe. Mia? I'm sorry, you're Benjamin. Mr.
Yeah,
Feldman.
That's fine.
From the MLA.
Correct. I speak on
Good
Mia's
afternoon.
behalf often, so that's fine. Thank you. So my name is Benjamin Feldman. I'm the landscape architect on the design team. I've also worked on this project for over 6 years. We've made significant effort to reach out to the equestrian community, including the mounted police, and reviewed on site the conditions regarding the river. We also believe this is a really important bike improvement project, so it supports LA's mobility plan for 2035. I'm also on the open space working group meeting for LA 2040, and as part of that effort, in conjunction with LA River Master Plan, this unlocks tremendous capacity within our own infrastructure for the future of LA, and in a timing that's really critical to keep the movement for LA improvement projects in focus. So not approving this project would set us back into potentially 3 years out beyond this expected construction date. So we really be here in support of this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Stephen Mejia, please come forward. He will be followed by Kat Superfiski, Julia Salinas, and Wayne Spindler. Welcome.
Yeah, good afternoon, council members. My name is Stephen Mejia. I'm the Policy and Advocacy Manager for Friends of Los Angeles River. As most of you know, Friends of Los Angeles River, we've been advocating for public access and ecological restoration of the river for over 30 years, working in partnership with you and your offices, as well as the Army Corps of Engineers, the county, and developing a lot of these master plans, as well as the input on this bridge. We are here definitely in support of the bridge. As many mentioned, the public access benefits to pedestrians, to the communities there that don't have safe access sort of across the Griffith Park, particularly for North Atwater. This bridge would be incredibly important for them. We think there have been a lot of concerns that have been brought up over the years, and certainly we feel that the engagement could have been a little stronger, but ultimately this is going to be a strong benefit for everyone. And as many have mentioned before, losing the momentum from funding from our state partners, our local partners, from our philanthropic dollars, it's really, really important for us not to lose any momentum with this project moving forward. And so FOLAR is here certainly in support of this project moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Kat?
Hi, my name is Kat Superfisky, and I'm the Executive Director of Grown in LA, which is a nonprofit that has specifically formed to actually provide the plant material needed for upcoming LA River restoration projects. I'm speaking here in support of the bridge as it is currently designed and planned. Not only is this project essential for connectivity, but it's also essential in terms of creating a precedent for how to actually leverage private funding towards these projects that need to happen along the LA River. It's absolutely imperative that we accept this kind donation and use it to our advantage to actually continue to revitalize the river. So thank you.
Thank you. Julia Salinas? And followed by Wayne.
Hello, I'm Julia Salinas. I'm a transportation planning manager in active transportation at Metro. I'm the modal lead for the call for projects for bikes, and I am also the project manager for the Los Angeles River Bike Path Gap Closure Project, which will continue the path south of its current terminus at Riverside Drive, 8 miles south to Vernon. Metro has supported this project in the past and continues to do so as a step towards more complete walking and biking network in Los Angeles County. The closest existing crossing for east-west passage over the river in this area is more than 3 miles to the south, and adding such a crossing through this project would increase safety and comfort for those wishing to cross the river from the existing LA River Bike Path to communities in the east, such as Atwater Village, Glendale, and other communities in Northeast LA. Thank you.
Thank you. Wayne Spindler, our final speaker on this item.
Go ahead.
Again, this is in CD number 4. We appreciate the work of David Rue, who's currently not paying attention, but that's okay. Building bridges with private money. Yes, private money is good. Because Wall Street took so many houses from all the people in the middle class and shipped so many jobs to Asia and China, that now the money they stole from all of us middle class should be given back into public works projects. Yes, it's called billionaires' guilt. It's kind of like a guilt trip in the Torah. See, that's what they're doing. These old billionaires are going to be dying off, and they feel guilty about taking the houses and stealing and pillaging the billions of dollars. So yes, more $1 billion, thank you.
Okay, with that, can I ask Representative from BOE to come forward, Shirley? Thank you for joining us. Give us a quick overview of the project if you can. Budget, funding sources, any restrictions on the types of funding sources coming in for this project, and then I have a few questions that I'd like to ask, and then turn it over to my colleagues on the committee.
Okay. Good afternoon, Shirley Lau with the Bureau of Engineering Bridge Improvement Division. This report before you provides BOE recommendations for your consideration to implement this project. To provide some background on this project, the proposed bridge will be situated roughly 1/2 mile upstream of Los Feliz Boulevard. It connects the two banks of the LA River. The bridge will be approximately 325 feet long, 35 feet wide, with 2 separate paths, one for pedestrian and bicyclists and one for equestrian use. This non-motorized multimodal crossing is project number 147 of the city's LA River Revitalization Master Plan that was adopted in 2007. So on September 14, 2016, this project's plans and specifications were advertised for invitation of bids by the Board of Public Works. The plans and specifications that went out to bid is for a cable stay bridge design, and that was provided by River LA, a nonprofit organization formerly known as the LA River Revitalization Corporation. Bids for the cable stay design were received on October 19, 2016. There were 5 contractors who provided the bids. The lowest responsible bidder came in at roughly $12.5 million. And due to the bids coming in at almost 35% higher than originally estimated, there was a shortfall in project funds to award the construction contract. On November 21st, 2016, the Arts, Parks, and River Committee instructed BOE to report back on sources of funds to cover the shortfall for the project, and also provide a construction cost comparison between the cable-stayed bridge design that went out to bid and an alternative prefabricated bridge design. So in response to that instruction, BOE has provided the information in Table 3 of this report. The top half of the table shows the construction cost for the cable-stayed design, which is based on actual bids, totaling $16.1 million. And for the alternative prefabricated design is estimated at $11.4 million. So the cable-stayed bridge design is shovel-ready. With the prefabricated bridge, there will be some additional steps required prior to construction. Also in Table 3, I want to bring your attention, BOE has listed the existing funding available for both types of designs. At this time, we have identified all the funding necessary to award the construction contract for the cable-stayed bridge. Included in the sources of funds is a cash donation of over $3.88 million from a private donor, and also a $3.66 million grant from the Caltrans Active Transportation Program, that's ATP. For the prefabricated design, these two external funding sources will not be available because the private donor is only interested in donating to the cable stay design. And for the Caltrans ATP funds, it is set to lapse by September 30th, 2017, should we not award a construction contract. The ATP grant has already received 2 time extensions, which is the maximum allowable per the grant's guidelines, and the funds will lapse by September 30th, should we not award the construction contract. Just a quick summary of the time frame of project implementation. Like I said, the cable stay bridge design is ready for award of the construction contract. All the permits are in place and the funding identified. It is anticipated that with the award of the contract by the end of this month, construction will take a little over 2 years to be completed by September 2019. Lastly, I just want to include that this report has 2 gift agreements attached to it. One from the private donor to gift the cash donation of over $3.88 million to construct the cable stay design. And the other gift agreement is with River LA that transfers all the other grant funds and also the documents associated with the project to the city. BOE recommends the approval of the instructions set forth in this report, and that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you so much for your report. So my understanding is there's a difference between the prefab bridge compared to the cable stayed bridge. And when was the prefabricated bridge, when was that on the table? When did that come to the table before the city?
That was just that was an instruction by the Arts, Parks, and River Committee.
Oh, to look at both.
To look
both
at
options.
both, an alternative.
Got it. But the donor's not interested in the prefab whatsoever.
That's
in fact,
correct.
he'll pull out of the deal if unless it's the cable style bridge.
That's correct.
And we have the chairman of Arts and Parks Committee in this committee, so I'm glad we have some cross-pollination here between 2 committees, and we have also Councilmember Ryu. Both districts are impacted by this project before us. So my question is, have there been any further negotiations since the last Arts and Parks Committee with the donor?
Not that I'm aware of. BOE was instructed to assist the CLA. The CLA is the lead on refinement of the gift agreement and discussion with the donor.
And if we don't construct this bridge and utilize the existing Caltran dollars, how will that affect our competitiveness with the future ATP programs?
It is written in the ATP guidelines that project delivery does weigh in on future ATP grants that are submitted by an agency for future grant funds. However, I'm not aware of details since I normally don't work on ATP grant applications.
But bottom line is if we don't award a contract by September 30th, we would lose out on those funds.
Yes, this $3.66 million ATP funds will lapse by September 30th.
So we had a donor that came to the city and said, we'd like to contribute. Mr. Kretz said, we'd like to contribute with the construction of this bridge, $4.8 million. Came to us in 2010, 2011.
I believe it dates back even probably earlier than that. So they reached out to River LA.
So fast forward, what, Mitch, 6 years later, we're here today. Why did it take so long, knowing that we have someone that wants to come forward with a substantial amount of a gift to construct a bridge because of the budget shortfalls for the fund? So there have been some funding gaps.
Right. So I believe it was the intention of the nonprofit River LA to deliver the project. However, due to the ATP funds, they were having trouble with executing a master agreement with Caltrans.
Understood.
And so Caltrans asked the city to assist them in working on this project, to implement it.
And as far as what's the on the budget itself, what percentage of the budget of the project dedicated to equestrian, pedestrian, and bicycle usage?
I'm sorry,
what's the percentage of the entire project is dedicated to equestrian usage, pedestrian, bicycle?
Essentially, the bridge itself, it doesn't allow any vehicles. So half of the bridge is for pedestrians and bicyclists, and the other half is for equestrians.
And as far as naming of the bridge, is there any precedence in the city on city naming a capital project for a private donor that contributes to a specific project?
We're still in discussions. I believe the CLA has looked into that, and I'm not aware of
The city doesn't have a policy on that.
Right.
If
Not
you
that I'm
donate
aware
a
of.
specific percentage of amount, that you will be given those naming rights.
Right. I think we spoke about that a little bit at Arts, Parks, and River. We
committee,
don't
okay.
have that.
So if this committee and council concur with the recommendations of Arts and Parks River Committee, is there enough time to potentially negotiate a new agreement with the donor and maybe come back to council for approval prior to the bids expiring?
It'll be a very short timeline because we need to award the construction contract by June 2nd. That's when the bids expire.
Okay. I missed that part. I don't know if that was indicated. So June 2nd, you have to be, okay. Do we have any other? Okay, fantastic. Okay. I'd like to thank you so much. I'm going to actually, before I turn over to my colleagues, we do have our last speaker, the Honorable Councilmember Tom LaBonge, who has joined us to speak on this item. And then I'll turn over to my colleagues for questions. Mr. LaBonge, thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon, Mr. Buscaino, council members and committee and the public, and Shirley Lau and the great Bureau of Engineering. There's nothing like a bridge, but when someone comes up with a gift, the city should not look a gift horse in the mouth. The city should say this is something long overdue. And I feel bad if I do a critique of some of my work that we never were able to get this done in the time that it took. Mr. Lecretz is one of the great citizens of Los Angeles, and there's many things that he's done, including the Biotech Center right down here in the Arts District, which is a tremendous asset to Los Angeles. And this concept came up, and it is very important because it does transform the river in connection to Griffith Park for every day of the year. When it does rain, as it did rain this year, there was times that you couldn't cross the river at all. There's a reason why the horses are on what would be the west side of the river, primarily because, the bikes are on the west side of the river where the bikeway is, because the east side is primarily horses in a K district. And Mr. O'Farrell has done an outstanding job with that, and also working with the LAPD on a public ring, I believe, that's supposed to be coming down the line at some times. For the last thing I will say, Mr. Buscaino, it's a decision that the council makes. The first project that was ever done, in my knowledge, was the Amundsen Equestrian Facility, where Mr. Amundsen paid for the whole thing and gave the key to the Bureau of Engineering, as opposed to giving the Bureau of Engineering the money, because Mr. Amundsen got it built and done, and it's still now a Class A building for our E-platoon of Metropolitan Division Equestrian Unit of LAPD. So it would be up to whatever I believe the mayor and the council would want as far as any kind of naming. All I know is this family has given a lot to this city, and this gift is something that's pretty special because I don't think there's been another bridge that's been given to the city. There's been one any way, shape, or form. And Michelle Mowry, who's a great member of the city family, called me and told me about this because she knew of the history, and it's good to see Mr. Rue, who's up to date on all things Griffith Park, and Mr. O'Farrell, who caters to all in the right way here. So I thank you, Mr. Buscaino. Just want to strongly support it and thank the Bureau of Engineering and hope they make a little bridge off the Hyperion Bridge, as I showed you, Shirley, before I left here, so you could connect that. But that's another item. I don't want to violate the rules. Where's the city attorney? Right there, Mr. City Attorney. Thank you, Madam City Attorney.
Thank you, Tom. So with that, turn over Mr. O'Farrell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. LaBonge, it's always a delight to see you here. Thank you. And thanks for your stewardship all those years. So this bridge connects Griffith Park with North Atwater Village. It connects Council District 4 with Council District 13, and you won't need a car. You can get on a horse, you can walk, or get on your bike. This bridge design was approved in Arts, Parks, and River Committee last month with a council file transmittal with the instructions to approve recommendations 4 through 7, and then instruct the CLA's office, as has been said by Shirley, with the assistance of the city attorney and the city engineer, to refine the draft gift agreement between the private owner with specific terms with the city to accept the cash donation of $3.888 million to be applied to the $16.15 million construction budget for the North Atwater non-motorized multimodal bridge. And so that's the instruction, and once that comes to council, then they can probably wrap this up in one meeting, I would imagine. I think what it brought to light is the whole conversation about at what point do you name an entire infrastructure project for a private donor? Should it be more than 50% of the cost? Should it be? So those conversations can take place. But the fact remains that 3/4 of the funding, at least, will be from public dollars. Notwithstanding the generosity of the Lecretz family, I have nothing but praise for Mort Lecretz and his family. They're wonderful benefactors to the city of Los Angeles. But we also have to look after the interests of taxpayers here. And I think that we can land on the naming rights just the right way if we proceed in this fashion. And lastly, the whole budget gap, the funding gap issue, which was apparent in July of 2013 when I first took office. At that point, what had been a $5 million bridge, into Mr. Lecret's credit, he made a commitment to donate money for a $5 million bridge that we thought we could build. By the time I take office in July of 2013, the price had escalated to over $8 million, and there was already a funding gap. And that gap has been increasing ever since. And that leaves us now with this last piece, and it is on this chart that was provided to us. The last gap is $6.9 million, and that is to be filled by the Public Works Trust Fund, a state fund, and it'll be a reimbursement process. Now that has to go through the Transportation Committee, chaired by Mike Bonin. And so that's really the last piece once it goes through this committee. But Mr. Chair, I highly recommend approving this with the instructions from Arts Parks, because we worked on this for many, many months and received all the reports, did all the deliberation, and I think we're almost there.
Understood. So again, the instruction came out of your committee. It was to go back and negotiate with the donor.
Just refine the gift agreement.
Refine?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm still puzzled. Every day we battle bureaucracy around here. Mr. Lecretz came to the city, says construct a $5 million bridge. And now it's a $16 million bridge? In fact, it's a battle here every single day. How in the hell can we, the price tag was a $5 million bridge. We're now at $16 million. To the point where this man can easily walk away. Can you explain that? Or can someone explain that? I mean, is it... I mean, what was the... very similar at the port. We had the tray pack was being built out. It was $500 million overage.
If I may interject without putting Shirley on the spot, it's the design of the bridge.
The design
It's
itself.
the design, and it's a lovely, award-winning design. It's beautiful, but it's expensive. And we talked about this in my committee. The downside is that we, the city, had no say in the design of the bridge. The cable stay bridge was a decision that was made before I got into office.
I think before we all.
Yeah, I think it was. So we grappled with that in committee, and we have. I can only speak for myself, but I have the same lament that you do. Went through lots of frustration over this. What I landed on was the thinking that I'm comfortable with this as long as that current gap of $6.9 million can be deliberated on and approved through the Transportation Committee and make it to the council with approvals. That's the last piece of it. Now, I'll also say that I feel that past his prologue, and it's going to end up costing more than $16.1 million at the end of the day, in my view, without having any facts to say that. But if it's at 16.1 right now, and we've somehow gone from 5 to 16 in 6 years, that's a concern. So I think your concerns are valid, and I think that we have to, really think about next time there's some situation where we want a piece of infrastructure for the public good and not having control over the design ourselves. And that really, to me, is the case. Lastly, on that, we badly need a bridge there. There's no question about it. I was at the Equestrian Center yesterday in Atwater Village, and I know that there's a struggle. A lot of folks won't go into the river up and down either side because it's pretty treacherous as is. So we need a bridge for sure.
So Mitch, help me understand this, if I can. So coming out of your committee, you wanted to fine-tune the agreement with the donor. What necessarily are you looking at gathering or attaining from Mr. Lecretz?
So
Is it more of a naming issue or dollars in a sense?
So what we have is we need to have a conversation about, are we going...
Right. Before you, I just don't want to risk him saying, walking away and say, thanks but no thanks. I came to the city in 2010 with a $3.88 million commitment. That's my only concern.
And I don't think we're going to do that because it's to refine the agreement. I don't think there are any ultimatums on the table. But this entire complex is called the Lecretz Crossing on paper right now. And I think that in 2011, the Lecretz Crossing, if it was 100% completely covered with that donation, that would be one thing. But my recommendation, which was approved unanimously in committee, was just to go back, talk about refining the agreement and what that means.
Understood. Yeah. But again, the city does not have a set policy on how we accept contributions for naming rights. I believe Rec and Parks has a similar issue, but that's not Mr. Lecretz's fault. It's the city's fault moving forward. That's how I see it. Mr. Rube?
Mr. Chairman, thank you, and I fully concur with you. We sorely need a bridge. This has been worked on for a long time, and I thank my predecessor, Councilmember Tom LaBonge, coming here today to speak on this bridge going forward. And I agree, we need this bridge desperately. And first off, we made a promise to the Lecretz family. We made a deal, and I think we need to honor that. But at the same time, I concur with Councilman O'Farrell on carefully without jeopardizing our public-private partnership opportunity here, as well as this donor that came forward to the city, carefully see to clarify some of the, conditions. But at the same time, actually, I believe the city doesn't have a policy for naming rights, but Recreation and Parks actually does. But actually, it's very vague. It's almost as if we don't have it, because it's very loose and it's purposely done very vaguely, so it's very open for discretion, which is why I've been saying from the past, we have to figure out exactly what it entails for naming rights, and what does naming rights actually mean? Is it a plaque? What is it? Is it on a map? We have to have some sort of set guidelines, so in the future, before something like this happens, we have something to look forward towards to. But as far as this bridge is concerned, this has been long in the making. This needs to be done. We have over like $7 million in jeopardy of funding right now. So this needs to be done ASAP, and I am on the Transportation Committee as well, so I'll make sure that we convey all the concerns and expeditious nature from Public Works as well as Arts, Parks, and Rivers in that committee.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? So, again, the contract needs to be awarded, or what's the June 2nd deadline, remind me?
The June 2nd is when the bid bonds expire for the construction.
Say that again, I'm sorry?
The bid bonds expire.
The bid bonds expire on June 2nd.
So
this is of urgency, and this is of there's a concern on timing here. We're at the 22nd of May here. We have 2 weeks.
We received the bids in October of 2016. So the contractor has extended the bonds all the way, and June 2nd is the fifth extension.
So we can move forward on the June 2nd, deadline. However, Holden, on what you're recommending, Mitch, of refining
Refinement of the contract.
The contract with the donor.
Yeah, that in and of itself is not going to hold up the project.
It's not?
No.
Confirm that will not hold up the project?
Well, we need recommendations 1 through 3 to be approved. Without the cash donation, I cannot go to award the construction contract.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Okay. I'm a little concerned about going to, if we refine the, we're going back to the.
Here's something else that we need to that we might want to anticipate struggling with. If it's already at $16.1 million price tag, and if we're really fortunate and it works that the Transportation Committee and the full City Council approves the $6.9 million Public Works Trust Fund,
right?
We may very well need to go out to another donor. And if something is named the Lacrette's Crossing over the LA River and the whole area is called the Lacrette's Crossing, I don't expect we'll get another donor. And we'll have to come up with more public dollars. So that's a concern of mine. And that's one of the reasons I think that we need to refine the naming rights contract and have a conversation about that. If it's escalated, in 2013 it was an $8 million bridge. It's doubled in price since then. And I just think we have to keep our options open, and we can, in terms of a possibility of another escalation in the cost.
Okay,
Mr. Chair, clarification question. At Arts, Parks, and Rivers, when we approved the amending motion, I thought it wasn't going to be contingent. I thought we could move forward, and or I thought maybe you guys were going to come back before so we could meet that deadline. Because are you telling us now that if 1 through 3 is not adopted, then we can't meet the June 2nd deadline?
Well, without number 1 through 3 adopted, then when we go to Board of Public Works, we'll be short the $3.88 million. That's why we won't be. I think it's a matter of timing. I don't know when's the next Arts, Parks, and Rivers. So I think if we could have discussions prior to voting.
We'll waive it out of committee.
Okay.
I mean, what I want to see is this conversation to take place. Right. I'm very aware of the deadlines. So we'll waive, again, I don't think this is the concern. I think the concern is let's get this to T committee,
Right.
and let's allocate that $6.9 million funding gap.
Because my understanding at Arts, Parks, and Rivers, Mr. O'Farrell, was you just wanted an opportunity for clarification and possibly, because
To refine.
we didn't know what the Lacretz Bridge was. We knew it was going to be called Lacretz Crossing, but is it going to be, what do they expect? Do they expect a plaque there? What do they? It was more of a clarification thing, so it wasn't to hold it up.
Correct.
So, yeah, if we have to waive it out of committee
Again,
or
as long as we can meet these
yeah,
deadlines.
because I want to make sure we meet this deadline.
We're leading
and
with a
this goes
sense of
forward.
urgency, that June 2nd deadline. But at the same time, again, I'm still concerned as we go back to Kretz that we want to refine the agreement. My concern is him walking away.
So, Mr. Chairman, what do we? I don't know. Maybe it's CLA to answer it, but what do we have to do today to make sure that this? I mean, with what Arts, Parks, and Rivers did, because we thought we weren't going to hold it up. It was just clarification. So how do we make sure this gets done by June 2nd?
Is someone from the CLA's office here? Okay, Matthias is here, yeah. The CLA's office was never involved in this whole arrangement until we've invited them to from committee.
Hello, Matthias Bartham for CLA's office. In order to make honestly speaking, it's unlikely there would be enough time to make the June 2nd deadline if we had to contact the donor and work something out. So at this point, I mean, what we could do is if this committee approves it moving forward in T committee, I mean, the only thing we can do is reach out to the donor prior to it being scheduled for council to see if they're open to having the items we know are important to the chair of Arts and Parks discussed, to see what their feedback is. But if they don't show interest in having that conversation, then we surely can report that when this item does go to full council. But if we wait until council approves the recommendation to have us reach out to the donor and then to come back with the formal report, that would likely take us beyond the June 2nd deadline by the time it comes back to council for consideration.
So the question is, so if we're willing to, because the chairman of Arts, Parks, and Rivers is willing to waive it out of committee to meet this June 2nd deadline and make the contact with the Lacretz family before or after, but how do we make that happen since we're not meeting in Arts, Parks, and Rivers again?
Well, it would be, if today Public Works Committee approves it to move forward, the T Committee, they listen to it on Wednesday, they approve it. I don't know when this item is scheduled for full council.
So as long as it's scheduled in full council could override Arts, Parks, and Rivers, you're saying?
They could.
Okay.
Okay. Any other?
No, so we can move, yeah. So basically, as long as it gets to, from what CLA is saying, as long as it gets to City Council before June 2nd and we vote on it there, it needs to come out of our committee, come out of Transportation Committee, then it'll go to City Council to get voted on, right?
Yes, but at
Right.
that point,
We also don't want to risk losing the $6.9 million of the Public Works Trust Fund to move forward on the construction of the bridge.
yes, and again, it all depends on what Transportation Committee does. If they approve, because it is a $6.9 million loan from the Public Works Trust Fund that's supposed to be paid back with transportation dollars. And if T Committee is not okay with that, then that can also now, the funding would not be there. And the same issue.
Understood.
Yes.
See Deborah coming to the mic from BOE. Deborah Weitrop.
All due respect, council members, we actually have to be at Board of Public Works, right, June 2nd. So council would have to act before that because we have to award at board by June 2nd.
Mr. Clerk, when's the next T committee? Do we know if Mr. Bonner is going to hear this?
The Transportation Committee meets Wednesday, May
This
24th.
Wednesday. And I'm assuming this is agendized, right?
They have a special agenda for us coming.
Okay, fantastic. Okay.
So Deborah, wait, so it just needs to come out of Public Works Committee by Wednesday, or does it have to come out of City Council by Friday to go to the commission on Tuesday?
We can't award without the donor's funding. So for the discussion with the donor to happen and then for council to approve that, we have to be back at board by June 2nd. That's our drop dead date with the bidder for the project.
And do we know if the donor is on calendar to meet with in the next week or two? Anyone from LA River?
That was Matthias.
From River LA or Matthias?
Matthias.
Do we know if we have the donor on calendar to meet with in the next 2 weeks?
I do not. I have not been instructed to reach out to the donor as of yet, so I've never spoken to the donor. It's all dependent on the donor's schedule as well. But it would be my hope that if we are instructed to reach out to the donor, that we would be able to meet prior to, well, sometime this week, I would hope, in order for it to get processed next week by council.
So let us play our part in moving forward with our dedicated dollars to get this bridge built, and would recommend concurring with the Arts and Parks and River Committee and move the item forward. I do, Mr. Labange, you're scratching at the mic. You haven't missed the mic.
No question about it, Joseph. But I wanted to tell you, as I sat back there, the last bridge that was built in the city of Los Angeles was the Los Feliz Boulevard overcrossing for the Los Angeles River Bikeway. That's the last bridge that is built. And the city named it after Alex Baum. Okay. If you want to ask the city attorney, Mr. Jordan, is that correct? Did I say that correctly, Mr. Jordan?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that, please,
Mr. Jordan?
Yeah, it is Mr. Jordan,
Heaven
yes.
can't wait. God bless you.
That's right. Here he comes.
If I could go to where Mr. Lacretz is tomorrow, where he is on Sunset Boulevard, and I could express anything that you would want, you give me a piece of paper to expedite it, and if you know where Sunset Boulevard and McCadden is, you could meet me there, and I'll bring you in on it tomorrow. The tragedy is when we have these opportunities in front of us, and we miss the opportunity that all comes together. And it has been a long climb, but you're right there right now for something that's going to make a difference in the lives of generations of equestrians, of cyclists, of walkers, in a way that we all want to see done. So if you want to instruct me, or if you want me to take this young man up there tomorrow and drop him on the corner or whatever, I want to help you get this done in the interest of the city. And remind you, the last bridge was the Alex Baum Bridge, which we named for Alex Baum, just like that, just by a council motion. And we got approval from David Freeman to build that bridge, because DWP didn't want that bridge on that side because of the transmission lines. But they were able to solve all those things. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Okay, so with that, that'll be the recommendation of this committee, is to concur with the recommendations of the Arts and Parks and River Committee, and move this forward to T Committee, and hope to get this in front of council within the next week or so. Thank you so much. That'll be the order of this
Mr.
committee.
Chair, I'm sorry.
Yes.
One clarification. We have to approve all of the 1 through 6 for it to go forward?
It's what the...
Is that okay?
1 through 7, all
1 through 7.
recommendations.
Or is it okay if or can we approve what APR did?
Yep, that's
okay too?
Recommendations 4 through 7, with the instructions on the refinement of the gift agreement.
So moving forward, except going back to the donor and refine the gift agreement.
Right. So just a clarification, I think what the CLA is saying is at full council, we recommend 1 through 7 then. That gets approved, and that's okay too.
Right.
By the time we get to full council, yes. So what'll happen is it'll come back to my committee after the refinement meeting. I will then waive it to council.
Okay. When is
and not hold a hearing.
Okay. All right. When's our committee?
The last hearing will literally be T committee.
Oh, okay. So if T committee passes
For
it
council.
through, you're fine.
It'll come back to me, and then I'll waive it through
So
my
when's Arts,
committee
Parks,
for
and Rivers
adoption.
meeting?
Well, that's not going to matter if I waive it out of committee.
Oh. Okay.
Okay, thank you. That'll be the order. Thank you for all who came to speak on this item. Really appreciate your presence and your advocacy. So with that, we'll take the final 2 items together, items 2 and 3. If you can read those 2 into the record, Mr. Clerk.
Sir, item 2, motion Harris Dawson Buscaino directing the Department of Public Works with the assistance of Department of Public Safety, LA DOT, and Emergency Management Department to report relative to the services requested by city residents during the winter rainstorm season, and directing the Bureau of Street Services with the assistance of the Bureau of Sanitation, Bureau of Engineering, Department of Building Safety, LA DOT, and Emergency Management Department to report relative to mitigating rainstorm impacts and how to ensure Meter resources are available to residents experiencing rainstorm problems. Item 3, motion Blumenfeld CDO instructing the Bureau of Street Services to report relative to the repair of potholes and the funding necessary to expedite repairs, and instructing LADOT to work with Cal DOT to repair potholes on freeways and highways.
Thank you. I do have one speaker card. Mr. Kenneth Chansey here representing Council Member Marquise Harris Dawson, Council District 8. Welcome.
Hello. Hello, members of the Public Works Committee. My name is Kenneth Chansey. I serve as Legislative Deputy Councilman Harris Dawson. I'm here to speak today on the issues that prompted me to draft this motion now before this body. First and foremost, I wanted to thank you for taking up this item and scheduling it for today. As you all know, the city is responsible for providing many city services which are not as regularly scheduled in less affluent parts of the city, like South Los Angeles. Some of these services include trees which need trimming, medians that require both maintenance and weed abatement, dirt alleys which need to be paved, especially if they serve as a resident's only access point for their vehicles, and an ample supply of potholes. These problems alone are issues each of our council offices deal with on a daily basis. However, when there are periods of heavy rainstorms like the one from earlier this year, these problems are exacerbated and can leave many residents stranded in their homes or cars, waiting for various city departments to provide resources. One such resident is a constituent by the name of Edgar, who was stranded in his car garage due to a large body of water which prevented him from using his car for his daily routine. I circulated photos of his access point to his alley. During the rain, he stacked bricks and wood along the length of his alley in an effort to prevent his car from getting stuck in the mud. His efforts were not in vain, as he was able to utilize street parking once his impromptu alley paving was complete. However, no resident should have to exhaust this amount of effort in the rain retrieving their vehicle, among other issues, and to that effect, we've introduced this motion asking various departments to report on the number and types of service requests submitted by city residents and response time to those requests, any recommendations for council to consider on ways and means to address constituent concerns, and any efforts to proactively mitigate many of the impacts faced during the periods of heavy rainfall. Our office would like to thank each department for their diligent work, and we look forward to working on a proactive strategy over the next few months. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chansey. With that, if I can call the Bureau of Street Services to come forward. So we had a horrific rain season this last go-around. Between the months of December 2016 and March 2017, we called for, and let me be clear, all city departments need to be commended for their management of this last rainstorm season. Bureau of Street Services, Sanitation, and BOE, Building and Safety, Department of Transportation, Emergency Management Department, really appreciate their swift response to a number of these emergency calls. If you can just identify quickly the community impacts as a result of these last rainstorms and ways that the Bureau prepares for rainstorms, and what are some of the ways the Bureau copes with the increased workload. I was on text messaging with Nazario Salcedo, our General Manager of Street Services, and I know in my district, Harbor Pines got hit hard. This is one of several communities, neighborhoods that were hit hard by the storm. So thank you for joining us, and looking forward to hearing the report.
Thank you. I'm Greg Spotz, Assistant Director of the Bureau of Street Services, and I oversee 425 hardworking city staff in the street maintenance, urban forestry, and investigation and enforcement divisions. It's this portion of our Bureau that's primarily the first responders on issues and emergencies related to the public right-of-way. It was a very challenging period from December through March, particularly January through March. It actually turned out to be a great stress test for our new digital workflow. A year and a half ago in August 2015, the city, or Public Works, were the first bureaus to adopt the new MyLA 311 computer system, and we retired our own legacy system called CERMIS, which is the way we used to track service requests. And subsequently, we worked closely with various folks, including ITA and the Mayor's Innovation Fund. And we got a grant to put tablets out in the field for our folks who do potholes and also tree emergencies, so they could communicate directly with MyLA 311 from the field. In the past, we used to leave work in the morning with a stack of printouts of service requests and then go visit them and then write on them what we did and then come back to the office in the afternoon and type them in. And now we have real-time flow of information to and from the field, including photos. And it's really revolutionized how we manage these type of incidents. It all sounded good in theory, but then we got tested. We got tested with volumes that were extremely high. They may have been some of the highest volumes we've ever seen, particularly because it's easy to make a request on the MyLA 311 app or a web request rather than having to call 311 yourself. In a typical non-storm month, we receive about 600 to 900 street pothole service requests. That's about 20 to 30 a day. In December, it got up to 55 or 60, and then it started going over 100 a day in January and went at that volume all the way through March. In total, from January to March, that 90-day period, we had 12,014 pothole requests, of which 10,523 were street potholes and the remainder were alley potholes. And I'm very pleased to say that we completed those potholes in an average of 2.5 working days, which is really an accomplishment. The commitment we made to Mayor Garcetti in the first year of his first term was that when we have volumes of up to 950 potholes a month, we would keep them under a monthly average of 3 working days. So this was triple to quadruple that volume, and we still kept that turnaround time. We had 5,273 tree emergencies in the first 3 months of the year, and our time to completion was 2 working days. We try to get on site within a matter of hours rather than days and secure the location, but often when we have a lot of things down, we have to cut and stack and leave it there and come back for a second visit to pick it up. When I started overseeing urban forestry, they had some metrics related to the first response, but they hadn't really been counting that final cleanup response. So now we've been managing to that, and we've drilled that down to 2 days even in this storm period. Some smaller items, but still can be quite significant. We had 2,150 palm frond requests during that period. Those were turned around in an average of 6.5 working days. And one palm frond request can be the size of this table. You know, it can be a whole community stacking effort of public and private palm fronds on a corner or a parkway, and then they call it in, and that might be one service request. You can have many, many cubic yards for one service request. We also had a lot of land and mudslides. This is a service category we really only see significant volumes when it rains, and one of those can be several truckloads of dirt and debris. And this was really exciting for our folks to attack because you're getting different people out there, the people who drive heavy equipment, the truck operators, not the tree people, not the pothole people, but a whole different group of people. And we worked on a lot of those, particularly for Councilmember Rue. I think 30 to 40% of those land and mudslides were in the CD4 area. And finally, we had 677 flooding requests. And sometimes those just mean that the storm drain system is temporarily overwhelmed by high volume and they self-clear within a few hours, but we go out and look at those, and sometimes we find catch basins that need clearing, and if we can easily do it with the end of a broom, we'll do it. Otherwise, we call sanitation and they help us take care of it. So those are the main statistics. There were a few other topics mentioned in the CD8 motion that I wanted to make sure we address. Regarding tree trimming, we don't trim trees in advance of storms. We trim them all the time. We're trying to trim, best practices says that we should trim them every 5 to 7 years. There's 700,000 street trees in the city. So that means to meet the 7 years, the long end of a best practice tree trimming cycle, we would need to trim 100,000 trees a year. That would cost about $18 million. We've trimmed about 120,000 in the first term of this mayor. So we are trimming about a third of what's needed to have a best practices tree trimming cycle. Regarding dirt alleys, there are about 18 miles of dirt alleys in the city, and it's been at least a decade since the city funded alley paving, new alley paving. And the ones that are left are challenging from an engineering perspective. They require drainage, they require grade changes. Some of them, the different driveways that emerge are not at the same grade because it's all improvised. So you can't just like grade it and then throw some asphalt over the top of it. We would be very interested in some future program to find funding to address paving some dirt alleys. Separately, we were very excited to see that the mayor and council did include some funding for resurfacing existing asphalt alleys in this fiscal year 17-18 budget that's just been approved. This is the first time since 3 or 4 years ago that there's been any money for that. Alleys are very difficult to fund because all your traditional transportation funding sources don't apply. It's not part of the street network, so you can't use gas tax, Measure R, Measure M, any of that stuff. It needs general fund to do alleys. Finally, the Blumenfield motion asked about Caltrans. Oh, I have to cover medians too. And DOT reached out to Caltrans and asked them if they needed any assistance with the potholes they were seeing on the freeway, and they said they had it under control. They didn't have statistics to share as to how many or how quickly they were turning them around. The CD8 motion also mentioned the median islands. We have 10.5 million square feet of landscape median islands that have irrigation, and then another 7 million of median islands that are called unimproved that don't have irrigation. The 10.5 million square feet of medians that have irrigation are usually maintained by contractors. We award 4 different contracts, one for each quarter of the geographic area of the city. And in somewhat of a perfect storm, in the middle of these storms, the contractor walked off the job on January 31st. Yes.
I think we're all feeling that, by the way. I'm hoping that comes to a resolution quickly.
Yes, we have received bids for the new citywide contracts and will be awarding very shortly. In the meantime, we brought on a contractor from Rec and Parks, a BMC, and they're maintaining about 20% of the system. And our staff has been taken off other projects to maintain another 30% of the system. So we've covered about half in this emergency situation that we're in. We had much higher growth than we normally would have because of the storms, so it was unfortunate that the contractor left at that time. So that concludes my report. I'm happy to take any questions.
Also, I believe our medians have not been watered in a long time, but because of this rainstorm, now we're seeing a bunch of weeds and brush growing on these medians that become eyesores throughout our city. So the contractor, the knucklehead contractor who got the work, but then months into it said, "Oh, this is way too much for me," and walked out. You know, he ought to be fined because our neighborhoods are suffering with these eyesores of medians and such. What is the next step on addressing that issue?
So the Board of Public Works opened bids in late April for each of the 4 quadrants of the city. One contractor bid on all 4, and one contractor, the one BMC that we're using, bid on 1. And so we're preparing to bring reports to the board to award those contracts in the next 30 days.
Very good. You know, we've had to tap into our community-based organizations, nonprofits. And Mr. O'Farrell?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Greg, great report and great response on all the potholes. That's pretty amazing. Don't know how you must have worked 24/7, certainly overtime.
We had to use a lot of overtime. I'm very proud of our staff because we have people who are willing to work anytime. And it isn't always the case in public life, but we have folks who are go-to people. They're sort of unsung heroes. There's people in the Bureau you know that you can call in the middle of the night or who've worked 7 days a week for 3-4 weeks, and they'll continue to show up and go out there. I mean, we only have less than 100 chainsaw-wielding people in urban forestry to respond to 5,273 tree emergencies.
That's amazing. Well done. So, question, there's a big dilemma, right? Because we have all these medians to take care of, and we have all these trees to trim, and we want more of everything. I mean, I'm building medians in my district, right? We just did Fletcher Drive. We built a median there. We're landscaping a median in Elysian Valley, and that's several thousand square feet. We're going to landscape it. It's under construction right now. And over in Glassell Park in South Atwater Village, I planted 140 trees last year. all on the public right-of-way. We're maintaining them for 3 years. They don't need any trimming until they mature, but we're watering them and keeping them alive. And we have plans for many hundreds more. So where I'm going with this is long-term, as we want to become a greener city and we want to reduce the heat island effect, we probably want to have 14,000, we have 700,000 street trees, right? So we want to double that. So, and then we want to landscape as many more medians as we possibly can, and we did Vermont. So what's the long-term thinking for that in the department? How do we mesh our goals for sustainability with our ability to maintain?
It's a great question and a complicated matter. It's not unlike how there's always money to build new parks, but it's hard to find money to maintain the ones that you build. Different sources of funds. However, I think Measure M, local return, and SB1 provide some real opportunities for creative and strategic thinking about the infrastructure of the city. I think that discussion has only just begun in terms of the recent budget process, but there's many, many needs as far as our streetscape. And as we want to move to a more multimodal streetscape, a safer streetscape, a greener, more sustainable streetscape that helps us adapt to climate change, we're going to have a multi-layered infrastructure maintenance approach. And, we're looking forward to being partners with you in that kind of strategic planning.
Thank you. Mr. Root?
Thanks, Greg. Thank you for the great report. And I really want to thank the Public Works Department along with all the other departments that helped out during these winter storms. I mean, we were too often in contact, which was a problem. And was it only 30-40% of mudslides in my district? I thought it was like 90% because we literally had 20 mudslides. Only about 4 of them were well known because they had lengthier closures, but the other 16 no one knew much about it because we had such immediate response from the Public Works Department. And of course, I got to give a shout out to our president of the Public Works Commission, Kevin James, who was literally on site in many of the areas. I'm going to preach to the choir here, but I'm not going to complain much about potholes because we just recently, we did in our recent budget fund to fix all our DNF streets. It would be interesting, well, I'm not going to ask for it since we're going to fix all our DNFs, but it would be interesting because most of these potholes are probably DNF streets anyways. So when we start fixing all our bad streets, hopefully it will translate into less cost for potholes because these are more updated, maintained streets.
Right.
But,
good point.
So, thank you.
This is, quite frankly, a good community to be on. Committee to be on. We're going to have an influx of revenue coming, and our main goal objective for me is what I signed up for is fixing our infrastructure, our streets and sidewalks, building bridges. So there's a lot happening here. So with that, thank you so much for your presentation. Thank the men and women of your department, the entire Public Works Bureau. Let's hope and pray that we don't, maybe we do need more rain, but not at this magnitude that we experienced this last go around. Thanks, Greg. Appreciate your presentation.
Thank you for your support.
So with that was the last item. We do have one card, general public comment. Mr. Wayne Spindler. He is no longer in the room. Okay, with that, this meeting is adjourned. Have a great rest of the day. I'm sorry? 2 and 3, I'm sorry. We'll approve items 2 and 3, yes, without objection. Thank you.